Hi, my name is Mike Reese and I am a registered dietitian. And I want to welcome you to the Stress Reduction Diet mini-series, where we're going to cover key ways in which your diet can help modulate and balance stress levels. In this particular video, we're going to discuss macronutrient timing and how important that is to optimize your circadian rhythm and neurotransmitter health. The key to reducing stress is to balance the neurotransmitters serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. Luckily, this can be directly affected by the diet. For example, the neurotransmitters that serotonin releases are normally controlled by carbohydrates. These carbohydrates produce insulin secretion and thereby affect the plasma tryptophan ratio. This process increases serotonin release. Something very important to understand is that fats and proteins aren't able to yield the same effect that nutrient-dense carbohydrates are able to do. In addition, studies have shown that when people crave carbohydrate-rich foods, it is an indication that they have low serotonin activity. When it comes to carbohydrates and the optimization of serotonin production, the structure and the timing are both critical. Furthermore, we found that between 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrates strategically placed at 2 to 3 key intervals during the day yield this effect. Equally as important as timing is the structure and nutrient density of the carbohydrate food. For example, refined sugars or other modified carbohydrates have significantly less of an impact on serotonin release than berries, apples, peaches, sweet potatoes, and other nutrient-dense, low glycemic index carbohydrate foods. When we speak of dopamine release, we have to note that it is highly influenced by protein consumption, and more specifically, tyrosine-rich protein foods. Tyrosine is converted to the bioactive neurotransmitter dopamine. In order to achieve maximum efficiency of this conversion, it's imperative to ingest the tyrosine at a time when your natural enzymes are active. During the wake cycle, at 4 to 6 hours after peak serotonin is the best time. So how do you do this? Or how do you make sense of all of this? The first step is to get to know your circadian rhythm. In order to do that, you have to know what your circadian rhythm is. Well, it's your internal clock. The clock that can influence sleep-wake cycles, hormone releases, body temperature, and other important bodily functions. It's also very important to start a journal as to what time in the day you feel the most stressed. What time in the day you feel most tired, sad, or restless? Are you a morning person or are you a night person? When do you find it most easy to focus? Are you a more outgoing and extroverted person, or are you more reserved or introverted? Believe it or not, all of these things are indicators of the hormones and neurotransmitter changes in your body that are set by your circadian rhythm. Keep in mind that because everyone is different, it's imperative that you get to know yourself. Let's assume that you are a night person. In the morning, you feel groggy and a bit out of focus. With this said, it's important to get a high-protein breakfast with adequate intake of tyrosine. Getting the tyrosine and medium-chain triglycerides in the morning will give you the kick to start your day. Something else to note is to avoid caffeine in the morning, as it will only cause a crash later. In the scenario that you get anxious or stressed later in the morning, that might be the perfect time to get your first 30 grams of nutrient-dense, low glycemic carbohydrates that don't contain much protein, such as berries, apples, or a healthy starch, such as yams, sweet potatoes, or squash. Refined sugars have a smaller effect on serotonin release and can cause a subsequent crash, whereas 30 grams of lower glycemic index carbohydrates from a baked potato or a peach cause a more sustained serotonin release. What's the likely result in all of this? After a few days of this, you will start to notice a trend. For example, during times of distress, that is where you must focus on improving serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. If it is common to experience moments of sadness, then we will focus dietary concerns on dopamine and serotonin rather than GABA. The trick of all of this is what you eat 2 hours before the onset of a saddened or lethargic behavior. Getting a good source of protein 2 hours before your carbohydrate snack will affect how the increased blood glucose and subsequent insulin trigger protein synthesis. So let's summarize how this might work. When you're energized, that's a good time to get protein that is high in inositol and tryptophan. For example, grass-fed beef, organic free-range chicken, turkey, or eggs. If you're stressed or anxious, that's a good time to consume 20 to 30 grams of low glycemic, nutrient-dense carbohydrates, not to exceed 3 times per day. For example, this may consist of yams, berries, quinoa, squash, or peaches. When you experience sadness, foods that are rich in choline and inositol, also in vitamin D3, help. Cantaloupe, oranges, vitamin D3 sources such as egg yolks, fish, and I also suggest getting sunlight or strong blue light exposure within 2 hours after waking. We'll continue to cover each of these categories in more detail in the subsequent videos.